Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to another wrap-up. Probably another long one. I feel like this is the only type of video I've been really doing recently, but what else can I do? I've been reading a lot of books and I need to talk about them. So let's get into it. First up, I have continued my reread of the Fruits Basket manga series by Natsuki Takaya, and I've read volumes 8 through 12. I've got 11 more to go before I'm done with my reread, and then I will do a whole video dedicated to the series, and it's going really well so far. I really like that, this is the bit of the series where it starts to go more from comedic and light to dark and angrier and sadder, and it's really good storytelling, and definitely there's some character development that has already happened. I'm very happy about it. So I'm not as familiar with the second half of the series, and I've actually forgotten a lot of the particulars of the ending. So I'm very excited to get to the end and remember exactly how everything turned out. But yeah, it's good fun. I'm really glad that I'm rereading them. You may be about to sense a trend, which is that I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks in the past couple of weeks, and that is very true because I've been bitten by the crochet bug again. I'm not usually that crafty, I'm not usually wanting to make things with my hands or whatever, but every once in a while I have to crochet something, and I'm back in that mood, and I've been working on a couple of projects in the last 2 weeks, and while I'm doing that, I'm just blitzing my way through a ton of audiobooks. So the first one of that batch is Stalking Darkness by Lynn Flewelling. So this is the sequel to Luck in the Shadows. It's the second book in the Night Runner series, and it's taken me like 4 years to get around to reading this because I read Luck in the Shadows years ago. So this is a series about two men, Alec and Sergil, who I'm gonna call them like spies, secret agents, thieves, whatever. They work for kind of their adopted kingdom, and in this particular one, a war is impending, and they are attempting to stop an evil dude who wants to gain terrible magical powers, and they don't want that to happen. When I break this down into like the world building and the plot, and it's the type of fantasy that it is, it's not super original. It's kind of traditional fantasy with a couple of unique tweaks. One of the things that stands out is that definitely women have a more equal place in society to men. Women are soldiers in this world as well, and I do like that, and I think it's the one thing about the world building that I'm really into. The second thing, which I think a lot of people might admit is the real attractive component of the series, are the two main characters who are, I believe, canonically bisexual men, and they do eventually develop a romantic relationship with each other. That's what I'm reading for. I don't care so much about the plot and the wars and the political plots and everything. I think it's a bit messy, a little bit episodic. I'm not really following that. I just want to see these two men fall in love and have adventures together. And so far, it's giving me exactly what I want. So very enjoyable, and I'm really looking forward to getting to the third book now. What is that one called? Like Trader's Moon or something? I have the audiobook on hold, so I should be getting it pretty soon. I won't be waiting in like another 3 or 4 years in between books. Next, I read The Prince and the Dressmaker by Wang. This one I actually did read in physical copy. It's a graphic novel. I couldn't really listen to that one on audiobook. But I had seen this one around for a while. I think Maya mentioned and talked about it. I know Shelby from Read and Find Out recently raved about it. But I actually went straight to the library and got this after John and Bex from Night Hunter Books hauled it. I was like, I keep seeing this everywhere. And they gave a little synopsis of it, and I was like, no, I really need to try reading that now. So this is like a pseudo-historical fiction graphic novel. It's definitely set in the past, based on the clothing and, the horse-drawn carriages and stuff like that. I think most of it might even be set in Paris. But it's not like super historically accurate, especially in the way that people behave and talk. But it's not really the point. The story is about a young man, Prince Sebastian, who enjoys dressing up in women's clothing and beautiful gowns. And he sees the work of a young dressmaker named Frances, and he invites her to come visit him. He lets her in on his secret and asks her to be his personal dressmaker. And she does. She starts making wonderful gowns for him, and he kind of develops an alter ego of this lady, something I've forgotten the word, who takes society by storm with her daring fashion. But what will happen if Sebastian's family or anybody else discovers his secret that he's a man who likes dressing up in women's clothing. And it was very sweet, and I don't know, I feel like it was very much about flexible gender expression and accepting people and loving them and not stigmatizing any of this. So it was very lovely. It was very quick to read. I liked the artwork. I don't think I've ever seen Jen Wang's artwork before in anything else, but it was very colorful and bold, and a little bit simplistic. There wasn't a ton of detail, but I really liked it. I think I only ended up giving this one 3 stars though, because it just mainly felt like a sweet story to me. I liked it, but it didn't take me to new emotional heights or anything. I thought it was pretty good. I definitely think that I will seek out more of Jen Wang's work though, because I would love to read more with her artwork. Next, I reread Matilda by Roald Dahl. Now, if you'd asked me a little while ago if I had read Matilda before, I would have been like, no. I watched the movie a couple times when I was a kid. I think it came out when I was like 6, so I was the perfect age to be watching it. But it turns out that apparently sometime I did read like a print copy of Matilda when I was very young. My reading list says I did, but I don't have any recollection of that. So I listened to this on audiobook. I think it was the version narrated by Kate Winslet. It was really good, and I liked it. I mean, I've always known the general story of Matilda, and I've always really liked it because, come on, Matilda is a genius. She reads voraciously, and then she gains telekinetic powers. So it was a great story. I think I'd forgotten how good of a story it is. The one thing though that kept me from really enjoying it, and this is a problem that I have with children's fiction now, reading it as an adult, is there are so many terrible adults and terrible parents, and I just can't take that a lot of times. Even though I know I'm reading fiction, my brain and my emotions are all like, but if this was real, this would be abuse and neglect, and people should be thrown in prison for this. And I can't really turn that bit of my brain off. I wish I could go back to reading this like I did as a kid, which is that this is exaggerated, and that view of adults as just completely rotten all the way through and getting away with doing these terrible things is kind of the child's exaggerated view of the world, like how they're seeing things. That is the one thing that kept me from really deeply engaging with the story emotionally, but it was very good, and I really want to watch the movie again. I haven't seen it since I was a very small child, and I think I would love it. I also suspect that the end was changed a bit. That was the other thing that kind of disappointed me. Is this a spoiler? I mean, who doesn't know this? Matilda doesn't keep her telekinetic powers in the book, and that's what I thought she should have. I thought she should have, and I think the movie made that change, but I don't know. Tell me if I'm right or not, because I honestly don't remember. My friend Paul from A Common Touch of Fantasy recently mentioned that he was going to listen to the Penric and Desdemona novellas by Lois McMaster Bujold on audiobook, and I thought to myself, well, I've never really tried the audiobooks before. I should do that. I've been meaning to reread these novellas for a while. So I found out that all of them were available to me in one of my library's overdrives. So I started rereading the series by listening to them on audiobook. So I listened to Penric's Demon, the first one, and Penric and the Shaman, which is the second one. Later in the series, you can see how much Penric has grown up and developed, and he's gained much more confidence in his sorceress abilities. But to go back to Penric's Demon and to see him as, you know, his 19-year-old self, he's on his way to his betrothal, and he becomes possessed by a demon that gives him sorceress abilities, and it completely changes his life. He leaves his home and his family, and he goes away to become a sorcerer, and he's never even left home before. So it was really, really lovely, and I think that these novellas really stand up over time, because rereading it was just as good. And I can say the same thing about Penric and the Shaman. It was just as good the first time I read it, so thoroughly enjoyed it. You would think that when I'm collecting these hardcover editions, I would reread them in the print copies that I own, but clearly I am not doing that. I will do that eventually, but I'm really liking the audiobooks. Next up, I read issue 24 of Uncanny Magazine, which is like the double issue Disabled People Destroy Science Fiction. And I buddy read this with Paul from A Common Touch of Fantasy, which was great. I really enjoyed having somebody to talk to about all of the stories and like my immediate reactions to them and stuff. So overall, this was a very good issue. I'll probably talk about more of the stories in this later. I want to catch up on some of my Uncanny Magazine issues that I need to read and then do another short fiction favorites video, which I haven't done in like a year. It's been a while. But I will say here that I had two standout favorite stories from this issue. The first one was an original piece, The Stars Above by Catherine Duckett. Most of this takes place in Kazakhstan, I think. It was so good. It was exactly my type of story. And the second one is one of the reprints, and it was a reread for me by Degrees in Dilatory Time by S.L. Wang. And I think that I actually talked about the story when I first read it years ago in one of my earliest short fiction favorites videos. And man, did this one stand up. It was even better the second time around. I got even more out of it. And like my perspective and how I interpret it had changed a lot too. And it was still so good. Imposter Syndrome by Mishell Baker. This is the third book in the Arcadia Project series. It follows a woman who has mental and physical disabilities as she becomes involved in the Arcadia Project, which kind of monitors the relationship and the travel between the human world and the fairy world. Things go disastrously wrong at some point. I don't want to spoil the first two books, but essentially there's like a civil war schism within the Arcadia Project, and Millie is part of the splinter organization that's kind of cut off on its own and is trying to bring down the rest of the organization, and a lot of this revolves around like slavery as the basis of the magic system, and they want to change that. It's very complex. So in this third book, which felt quite a bit like the end of the series, maybe it's trilogy, maybe there'll be more, I'm not sure, a lot of stuff gets wrapped up. The writing remains good. One of the things that I've always really liked about the series is that it's so readable. It has like this, just one more chapter feel to it. You could just read large chunks of it in one go, and I love the way that Baker writes. But was it just me, or was the plot so messy in this one? I know I'd forgotten some things from the first two books, but there were so many things happening, and I just couldn't keep track of it. At some point, I just stopped caring somewhat about the plots and the heists and the schemes and the plans and everything, and I just wanted to get to the end to find out what would happen to the characters, you know, and where they would all end up. So that was disappointing. I think there was just something fundamentally too complex with the plot, and it started to topple over a little bit. But anyway, I will definitely read any more books that Mishell Baker comes out with. I just wish that this one had been a bit more solid. Next, I read poetry, which is a little unusual for me, but I've been challenging myself to seek out more poetry this year. So I read Our Numbered Days by Neil Hilborn, which is his first published poetry collection. Like a lot of people, I was introduced to his work through his poem OCD, which was a viral video sensation a couple of years ago. I really liked that, and after I re-watched it a little while ago, I decided to look up his poetry collection. I will probably put trigger warnings on this collection for things like depression and anxiety and OCD and contemplation of suicide and things like that. It's very much about those things. I don't know that much about Hilborn as a person, so I'm not gonna assume that I know anything about him based on this poetry collection. But I liked the topics and how they were talked about here, and I just liked the flow and the cadence of his poems. Even though I could definitely tell that some of them were meant to be performed rather than just read on the page, there was something actually very poetical about his lines of poetry that really worked just reading them and listening to them in my head. So that was great. And I think he has a new collection that came out this year, and I definitely want to seek that one out as well. I have had difficulty finding poetry, especially by modern, currently working poets that I actually like. So I'm happy, really happy that I found this one and I enjoyed it. Then I listened to a short story collection by Lois McMaster Bujold called ProtoZoa. When I started listening to this, I did not know that I'd already read all the stories in it. I was like, this is awfully familiar. Yeah, because I'd read the stories before. So there are 5 in here. 4 of them are short stories and one of them is, I think, a full-length novella. So the first 4, the first 3 stories and then the novella, I had originally read in this collection, Dreamweaver's Dilemma. This was published by Nesfa Press some years ago. Wasn't super impressed with any of it, and upon re-listening to those first 4 stories, I was still like, okay, this is mildly entertaining, but not that great. The first 3 stories are some of the earliest stories she ever wrote. One of them I think was her first professional sale, and they're kind of contemporary stories set in a contemporary America where an alien shows up and wants to buy bleach from a housewife, or the good old boys in a neighborhood discover that a pothole in the road is kind of like a black hole and they start stuffing their trash down it or whatever. They were amusing but entirely forgettable in my opinion. The novella is Dreamweaver's Dilemma, which is a proto-Vorkosgan saga, Vorkosaverse story, and I don't think it's essential reading at all. It's okay, but it's also kind of forgettable in my opinion. The best story in this entire collection is Aftermaths, which is the last one, and this was probably my 4th reread of the story. I seem to read it at least once a year in various collections. It's probably the most reprinted short story Bujold's written or something. This is also set in the Vorkosgan universe. It's set right after the aftermath of the Bahrain-Escobaran War, which happens in Shards of Honor, I think, so it's quite early on in the internal chronology of the series. And it's just this little snippet of 2 people on a spaceship. One of them is an older, middle-aged woman, and the other is a young man who's the pilot, fresh out of academy type of person. And they are looking for dead bodies and collecting them and, taking them back to Escobar or Barrear and stuff. And yeah, it was very good. On the whole, though, I think that ProtoZoa is something you can skip unless you are an avid Bujold fan and just read everything she's ever published. And at last we come to the final book in this very long video, Distances by Vandana Singh. This is a novella from the Conversation Pieces line from Aqueduct Press. I really need to get more of these because the 2 I've read so far have been very, very good. I am on a Vandana Singh kick this year. Earlier I read her latest collection, which is called Ambiguity Machines and Other Stories, and I really enjoyed it. Now I've read this, and I will be starting very soon her first collection, which is The Woman Who Thought She Was a Planet and Other Stories. So this novella is not my favorite thing I've read by Singh, but it combines some things I really enjoy. It's about a woman who is kind of a mathematical prodigy in some way. She experiences math as if it's topology or something. And a delegation from another planet that's kind of isolated shows up with the seed of a new mathematical formula or something that they need her assistance with to figure out what it is and how to use it. So I'm not entirely sure about the connection between the math and the way that it's experienced, because it's actually experienced like an immersive environment, almost like a virtual reality type of thing. And I'm not entirely clear on how that's supposed to work, but it basically comes down to the woman in the story, the mathematician, just has an amazing gift with math. And it also delves into the past of the mathematician, the people that she came from, really how her gift works and how she's at risk of losing her mathematical abilities because she's left her home and because she's left her people's culture and ways behind. And so it's tied up in her identity and who she is now and where she belongs. I loved how mathematical it was, and I think the way that it showed math very symbolically with this imagery and as a kind of an environment of its own, made it accessible to someone like me. Like, I like math, I'm good at math, but this is going into a realm of very advanced mathematics that I just can't comprehend. So it was great. And the one thing that came to mind while I was reading this is that this almost feels like a very like adult version of the Binti novellas by Nnedi Okorafor. It involves adults, not teenagers. But there's that mathematical ability, there's going to a foreign environment, you know, there's not a university here, it's more like a temple, but just the ability and the character's journey and everything really reminded me of Binti. So I think that if you love the Binti novellas, pick this one up and see what you think of it. And that is it from me this week. If you have read any of these and you want to talk about them, do leave me a comment down below. I may not have a video out for the next couple of days. I don't have anything quick to pre-film right now, and I have a very busy day ahead of me. Usually I manage to film something in the middle of the week, like on a lunch break, but I'm having a ton of very noisy work done on my house right now, and I'm like, it's very loud, and I'm feeling rather self-conscious because like they're working around the windows, they're putting siding on my house, and they can see me, and it's all good. The house project is going very well and I'm very happy about it, but it's changing my routine a little bit. So anyway, whenever I talk to you next, bye.